Well, hello and welcome back to The Slice. This is the first ever episode of The Slice podcast featuring Beckett Chung. He's kind of like our producer, social media guru here. So welcome to the show,
thanks
Beckett.
For having me on the podcast.
Of course. So this podcast is presented by the Front Row Show, which this topic was originally just going to be for the Front Row, but because of the current circumstances with lockdown and quarantine all over the world, Front Row people have been nice enough to allow these shows to be shown to everyone. But there is going to be a new segment where me and Beckett are going long form on podcasts like this. They'll be available on audio format and on YouTube as well, obviously. And on today's show, we're getting into the topic of the greatest rivalries of all time. Not like the rivalry that me and Beckett have in tennis where I consistently destroy him and it's not really that close. But these rivalries are historic. They have very close head-to-heads, most of them. And they've just meant a lot to tennis over the years. So we're going to go through, I think, 5 today. Beckett, is that right?
Yeah, we'll start with, we'll do 5 for sure. Maybe a few bonus rounds.
Something like that. Maybe a few bonus rounds. Anyways, so Beckett, before we get into this, quick intro. If none of you have seen Beckett before, he traveled with me to the Delray Beach Open this year, which was literally made possible by the Front Row people. So thank you. Thanks to the new people who just joined the Front Row Show, including some of the trolls. Still showing love, though. Beckett, how was your experience in Delray, and what was it like watching professional tennis for the first time?
So that was my first ever experience watching professional tennis, so it was unreal. I had one of the best times of my life down in Delray Beach, talking to the pros, really seeing a great community down there. That was really amazing to see.
Sweet. Yeah, I had a good time with you, and you made our content so much better. If you haven't seen those videos, folks, check them out on the Delray Beach playlist on YouTube. So today we're going to get into the greatest rivalries of all time. And now some of these are probably obvious to you guys, but we're going to get into some of the stats. We're going to talk stats, and then we're going to move into player contrast, and then other things that just add into the drama. Me and Beckett have both done a bunch of notes on this, and we're going to be pretty detailed in here, and we're probably going to debate some things. Right, Beckett? Yeah, mainly things between to be transparent up front, I'm a Federer fan. As most people say, you're so Federer biased. It's like when I'm actually reporting on matches and breaking down matches, I don't think I'm biased at all. And I'll argue any of you on that. But I do pull for Federer, and that's not a crime. Beckett, on the other hand, pulls for Nadal, has for a long time. Would you say you're a big Rafa fan,
I always
Beckett?
cheer for him. Although I don't love him the same way that you love Federer.
Yeah, that's probably true. Not many people would. So let's just get into these. We're going to start with the I would say what I would consider the greatest rivalry in tennis history first. I don't know if you would consider it this as well, Beckett, but we're going to start off with Federer, Nadal.
So Federer and Nadal, arguably not even a rivalry because Nadal has beat Federer's ass so many times. Are we allowed to say ass on this podcast?
Wow, so we're gonna get into it right away off the top. So that's just a ridiculous statement. Obviously, it's a rivalry. They've played 40 matches together. Federer's won almost half of them, 16. So that's not really super one-sided there. And they've literally, I know you're mostly being a bit facetious, a bit sarcastic with that statement, but would you not agree that Federer and Nadal has been arguably the most historic and most legendary rivalry in tennis history, just because of they're arguably the two greatest players. In my opinion, they are the two greatest players of all time. They've had 40 battles together, and they just had some of the most classic matches of all time. And the way that their styles contrast, and the way that it's like fire and ice, and it's kind of like two different game styles. Do you think that makes it the greatest rivalry of all time?
The whole story that we tell ourselves about the dynamic duo of those two really is what makes it great. So I think their personalities are not that different, but their game styles are totally opposite. I've written this in an article before for you where I've said it really felt especially at the beginning, it's a little bit more experience versus much younger, lefty, righty, one-handed, two-handed, major aggressive, major defensive.
Right. Yeah, no, that's totally what you see when you watch those guys play. I've actually, in all this time with the tennis season being off and in quarantine, I've had so much time to watch old matches. and the ATP's been releasing all these things on ATP Tennis TV. And I watched their first ever matchup. Nadal won, and I feel like he kind of took. I mean, Federer knew about him. He said afterwards, and he said the loss didn't even surprise him because he knew how good Nadal was playing at that point. And this was back in 2004 at Miami. And then the next match they played, Federer obviously knew about him, and if Nadal had already won some match or tournaments at that point. And this was another final, and this was the only time that Federer's come back from 2 sets down to beat Nadal was at this Miami Open final in 2005. And you can really see it there where I think even back then the stage was already set for a rivalry, because I think just looking back to that time, Federer from the end of 2003 to up until their first match in 2004 and even past that, Federer was the best player in the world by far. He was dominating players, and outside of Nadal, he was crushing every single other person. And then Nadal, I think, honestly brought this whole new level of movement, I think was arguably his biggest thing. He obviously brought the big spin, and he played the style that really affected Federer, hitting it to his backhand 80% of his shots. But the main thing, I think, was how fast Nadal was and how powerfully he was counterpunching on the run. So the shots that Federer would normally get away with, coming in after, Nadal was just ripping winners up the line or with his backhand cross court, and it was kind of blowing Federer's mind at the sense, and it forced Federer to adapt, and that's a huge storyline that's going to play into this rivalry. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think both of them really changed the game in terms of fitness. I think so.
Right.
Nadal in terms of just straight up strength and speed, but Federer in terms of recovery, right?
Yeah.
He played 3 years of insane tennis, and he played a lot of tennis. And back when even some of the Masters matches were 5 sets, and he was not getting hurt for I don't know how long. That's
True.
insane.
True. Yeah. No, Nadal definitely changed the game when it comes to strength and kind of speed. I think Federer is insanely fast as well. And then Federer almost kind of, when Nadal came onto the tour, I heard about Federer upping his fitness level. But I think that Nadal forced Federer to get better with his movement a lot and with his just in game. When you watch those old matches with Federer, he doesn't seem to move his feet as fast as he literally does almost now or even in the last few years. And you can see Federer as being way more mentally aware of his movement at this point in his career than he was back then. I think he was kind of coasting off of his skill a lot of times when Nadal first started coming on the scene. And then with Nadal coming on, and especially Djokovic and then Murray and all those guys becoming all better movers, I would say, it forced Federer to become a better mover as well. But anyways, let's just get into some stats here in their rivalry. So there's 40 matches they played. The head-to-head is 24 Nadal, 16 for Federer at this point. Federer has never had a positive head-to-head against Nadal. Like I already said, Nadal won their first matchup, Federer won their second. And then I think Nadal won their next 5, which is crazy because at that point, like I said, nobody could touch Federer other than Nadal. Going into the 2018 or the 2008 year, the head-to-head was 8-6 for Nadal, 8-6 Nadal over Federer, so it's pretty close at that point. But then 7 years later, going into 2015, the head-to-head was 23 for Nadal to 10 for Federer. So that's a crazy gap, and then Federer's closed the gap a lot since then. But that is pretty crazy. And why has Nadal been so successful against Federer, who's arguably the GOAT? Nadal is right now with the overall Grand Slam standing the second highest of all time. Why has Nadal, Beckett, do you think, had so much success against Federer in their careers?
Think one of the reasons, obviously the cross-court game plan is huge, but I think one of the big reasons at the beginning is Nadal really felt he had nothing to lose, so he would just play all out. If you watch those old matches of really young, teenage Nadal, he didn't get tight the same way he kind of gets tight now, where he just starts looping it and it falls short. He would rip shots. I've seen, there's this one match where he comes back from I think 2 sets to love down against Ljubicic, and he's just ripping every single ball that comes at him. He's 2 sets to love down. He's got nothing to lose. That's the kind of mentality he would go and play against Federer. Nadal is a great number 2.
Yeah.
He's got nothing to lose when he's chasing you, right?
Right. And I think you especially saw that in their head-to-head in 2000. So how the story goes is I've actually watched all the French Open finals that they played, which is kind of crazy because, as everyone should know, Federer's only won 1 French Open. But he was in the final of, I think, 4 French Opens before he won that first one. Or that was his 4th. I'm not 100% sure. But Nadal owned him on clay, and so many of their first matches were on clay. And that does have a huge part of why the head-to-head was so lopsided in that, because Nadal was just an animal on clay. He was easily the best player in the world on that surface, still is. And so many of those matches were on that. And then once it got to 2008, Federer won the Australian Open in 2008. Oh, no, sorry, he lost it in 2008. But he lost it in the semifinals to Djokovic, right? And then he came in to the French Open in 2008 and that got absolutely pounded by Nadal. And I talked about this earlier because it set up the Wimbledon final. But Federer that was one of his lower points of his early career for sure. He had mono in the offseason, so he just didn't have a good start to that season at all and just got destroyed by Federer or Nadal in the French Open final. And that set up the Wimbledon final, where Federer had beaten Nadal the previous 2 years in the Wimbledon final, and then Federer had lost to Nadal in the previous 3 years of the French Open. So it was like this clear contrast between like Nadal's the better clay court player, obviously, and Federer's obviously the better grass court player. But now with this weakened Federer and this heightened Nadal, they met at the 2008 Wimbledon, and Nadal was just, I think, played a better game as far as his own level was concerned on that game. Looking back on it, I don't think Federer played his best, but that's probably a huge part because he was the guy across the net. The amount of pressure that was on Federer to keep holding on to that number 1 spot and the Wimbledon crown, I think crippled him a bit. And again, Nadal didn't have much to lose. Losing at Wimbledon at whatever age he was at would not have been a bad thing for him. But he wanted to win, and he just took that champions mentality and just overcame Federer there in the most arguably epic match of all time. And that was, again, like you just said, playing from the number 2 position to overtake the king.
Federer said about that match before that he's not sure if he would have lost that match if he didn't get absolutely murdered in the French Open like a couple of weeks ago. He said like that was a huge blow to his confidence, and you kind of see that in the scoreline where it took him 2 sets to like get into the match.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's. I think you're totally right, because like the previous 2 French Open finals, they were super close. Like I think it could have gone either way, and when Nadal won those, it was like they were like on equal standings as far as like ability on clay. It looked like almost like they were both. It wasn't like super one-sided, but it was super close. But then at that point, I think Nadal did start to separate himself even more, and yeah, he like bageled. I think he bageled Federer in this 3rd set there. So, and when you're the number 1 player in the world and you have been for like 5 years at that point, I can imagine how that'd be insanely hard to take. So, Nadal, as the story goes, Nadal takes over Federer as the number 1 there, and in Wimbledon beats him again in the 2009 Australian Open final, and Federer cries. And I think there's just so much pressure on Federer, and he just can't stand that Nadal's overtaken him. And that randomly spurred on one of Federer's best years. He won the French Open in 2009, which is his first time, beating Soderling, who had beaten Nadal earlier in that tournament. And I watched that match again. That was the craziest hitting I think I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen anyone hit a ball bigger than Soderling did in that match against Nadal. And then Federer won Wimbledon, lost in the final of the U.S. Open, won the 2010 Australian Open. So he went on a run after that year of getting beaten by Nadal in 2008 to be the best player in 2009, for sure. And then, leading up into 2015, though, Federer kept getting older. Nadal just had his number in most times. I think it was about, for every 3 matches that Nadal won, Federer won about 1. So, and then recently, Beckett, why do you think that on any fast court, grass or hard court, Federer's had the advantage since 2015? Why do you think that's been the case with the evolution of the games?
It comes down to mentality again. Like, yeah, a lot of people say, okay, he just improved his backhand and that's what it was. But in every match you see them play, it's not all the same Federer just ripping into those backhands, taking them super early like in 2017. That 2017 change, that was a mentality change totally. Federer is going in super low ranking. He's like, I don't know if I can even come back this time. So I'm just going to do my best and play with nothing to lose because this is all bonus time for him. So I think that gives you the confidence, and especially for Federer, because he needs to be relaxed to play his best.
Totally. Yeah, you're totally right about that. When Federer is relaxed and he feels like he's implanting his game on the match, in my opinion, there's nobody that's ever been better playing with a tennis racket. Like, I think I saw that against Djokovic in the 2019 World Tour Finals. He seemed relaxed in that match. I don't think Djokovic played his best match, but he can just, and like in 2015 at different points, like the thing is, that's the way that Federer's game works best, and it's so potent when he's relaxed. But if he's tight, like 5% tighter, the balls don't hit the lines like they normally do. His serve isn't as good, and then he's vulnerable to guys like Djokovic and Nadal especially. So that's kind of the story of Federer and Nadal. It's this contrasting styles. When you watch their old matches, it's as a Federer fan, it's agonizing to watch those matches, and you just don't even know how Federer could beat them, because every single shot that Nadal hits basically is going to Federer's backhand. And they, for so many of those matches, they would just have rallies up the line for Federer. He'd just be hitting backhand topspin, trying to get it to Nadal's backhand. They'd both just be trying to get it to each other's backhand. But with Nadal definitely taking the advantage of that, because when the ball went short to Federer's forehand, he was usually going to win most of those points. So it was a crazy style matchup, and it's been one of the craziest things to watch. And yeah, lately on the faster courts, the mentality switched. Like Beckett said, Nadal's not as confident. Federer's not as worried about that. And I think we've seen some different styles, but throughout their, when all said and done, we're going to look at this style matchup and be like, wow, this was like a contrasting styles on a tennis court, kind of like the past with Federer. Like he plays with a style kind of from the past, and Nadal's like paved the way for the future for a lot of young players, I think.
Yeah, totally. So should we move on to, Nadal, okay. Djokovic?
And I'm ready.
Djokovic leads by 3 matches. They've played 56. So this one I think is great in terms of volume, but
crazy.
Federer and Nadal was so great because of contrasting styles. How do you think Djokovic and Nadal contrast their styles?
Yeah, I think this is slightly less iconic than, or definitely less iconic than Federer and Nadal, because just the two guys who came first. And the Djokovic fans watching, I understand the frustration with Djokovic not getting as much credit as he probably deserves. He has a winning head-to-head record against both of these guys. And I think the dynamic with Djokovic Nadal is that, to me, just thinking about this more and more lately, is what Nadal did to Federer by overtaking his throne and just being more physical than Federer was. Djokovic literally did to Nadal, I think, and it got into him mentally big time. So before up until 2010, Djokovic wasn't much of a problem for Federer or Nadal. He had wins against both those guys. He'd done it, but in majors, he'd won one major until that point. It was the 2008 Australian Open. And then sorry?
Honestly, that one I felt like at the time almost a fluke, because he kept on losing in the semis.
True, and you didn't know if Djokovic was just going to be like a Tsonga at that point. Like they'd all kind of made one or two finals, but we had no clue that Djokovic was going to turn out to be one of the all-time greatest. But I think what Djokovic did to Nadal was just he took that what Nadal brought to the game with explosive rallying and just power and topspin. Djokovic came out and elevated his game to be able to handle all of that pace and out-rally Nadal in a sense. Like he took movement to the next level. He's not necessarily faster than Nadal or anything like that, not more explosive, but he was elastic and he could rally forever and hit shots on the run that Nadal would do to Federer by hitting that extra shot that no one could believe. Djokovic would do that to Nadal and off his backhand. So Nadal's cross-court forehand was not as potent all of a sudden, and that was a big deal. So in 2011, Djokovic literally owned Nadal, and as a Nadal fan, I'm sure it was hard to watch that year. And then when Nadal finally won another major at the French Open 2012, it was such a big relief for Nadal, and he kind of got a bit of his mojo back. And then they've had a crazy duel until now.
Yeah, 2011 is one of the worst times, because you look at that and Nadal, I think he was in 4 consecutive Slam finals, tons of Masters 1000 finals, and it just kept on being Djokovic, just like that 42-43 match win streak, I think.
To start 2011, for Djokovic.
Yeah, that was painful.
Totally. That's one of the greatest win streaks in the history of tennis.
Yeah, it's nuts to start the season like that. You're not losing until the clay season's basically over.
Yeah, till the French Open.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I think. I think it's like Djokovic is just, he added a whole nother level of rallying ability. Like, what do you think affected Nadal so much with Djokovic's game?
I think the thing about Djokovic is he's a really efficient player.
Right.
So when you're talking about how their defenses contrast, it's Nadal is like pretty high effort defense, and Djokovic, because he can stick pretty close to the line for a defensive player. And another thing that should be talked about when it comes to the way that he's able to redirect pace is his racket is really heavy. Like it's heavier than, at that time especially, it was way heavier than both Djokovic, or than both Federer and Nadal's racket. So that's one of the big reasons he's able to kind of just step into the court and take Nadal's huge spin.
You're saying Djokovic's racket was much heavier?
Yeah.
Interesting. I did not know that. So yeah, that heavier racket, for those of you who wouldn't know listening, is like it's going to be able to absorb more pace, and it's just going to be a lot more stable. So you can like kind of a lot of it has to do with stringing, but you can like on the run, I feel like if you have the strength to do it, you can redirect balls way more easily, even when you're not as in good a position, or if you step into the court, it's going to have more behind it.
Yeah, you can think of it like a car crash, right? Like who's going to win in a car crash? A big heavy semi-truck or like a light smart car?
Totally. That smart car is going to get rolled. Who's the smart car in this scenario? Nadal?
Anyone who's hitting just like with, Nadal's racket's pretty light, but if you're hitting with like a much lighter, the ball is the smart car.
Yes.
Right. So like you can, whatever, this is stupid. You can hit two.
It's true.
Anyway, yeah, so that's one of the reasons I think Djokovic has had success against Nadal. Who do you think is winning this rivalry right now?
Right now? Well, I actually got it up on the screen here, and let's just look at their last few matches. So their last match was the ATP Cup. Djokovic won. And then the match before that was in Rome in 2019. Nadal won. But then it was Djokovic, Nadal, Djokovic. But the only wins that Nadal has been getting have been on clay. So I'd say if outside of clay, it's Djokovic is a massive favorite in these matchups. And on clay, it's still the favorite is Nadal. And that's kind of been a theme, I think, with both of these, Nadal with both of these players. Is he's definitely the obvious favorite on clay, and then on hard court, it's more of a toss-up.
So
right now, I think I would say Djokovic is probably leading this head-to-head. He seems to have a mental edge, and he's the number one player in the world right now. I think 2019 was a bit of a weird year with Nadal being crowned he had the most points at the end of the year, so there's no argument there. But he only had the one win against Djokovic, and it was that, and then Djokovic destroyed him in the Australian Open final. And yeah, I don't know. It would be hard to say Nadal's winning this head-to-head right now for me. I think I'd lean Djokovic.
So here's a stat. So like we said before, Djokovic leads Nadal in their head-to-head by 3 matches. But then if we look at one of the key measures that we use for measuring who's the GOAT is who has the most slam victories. Right. Nadal leads their slam head-to-head by 3 matches as well. So like, does that factor in it for you at all? Like
overall, who's better? Like who's greater, Nadal or Djokovic? Are you asking, or just in their head-to-head rivalry?
No, like like who's, if you look at the 2 players, who do you take as better?
I would take Nadal right now as the greatest, a greater player than Djokovic. He's got more slams, that matters. Like you said, he's won more. He's won more slam finals in there, and he leads the head-to-head in Grand Slams. I mean, it's such a tight thing. It's like, are you really gonna look back in the history books and be like, Nadal is definitely better than Djokovic? At this point, I would say yes, but I think the further we get away from this era, we're going to look back on these guys and just appreciate all of them. There's always going to be a debate to who the GOAT is. For me, it's Federer right now for sure. Oh, Freudian slip, almost said Djokovic. Maybe that's the true GOAT, as the Djokovic fans say. But for me right now, it's Federer, and we can talk about that. But yeah, between Nadal and Djokovic, I think Nadal still for sure. He's got 19 slams. Djokovic has got 17.
All right. And should we go to the next one?
Yeah, we should. So that's Djokovic and Nadal. That's just 2 animals of the of titans of tennis, and I think the 2012 Australian Open final kind of showed what a lot of their rivalry is like. Just brute rallying, crazy athleticism displayed by these 2 guys. And then we got Djokovic Federer, which is a whole nother angle to it, because Federer and Nadal had the crazy style matchup. Federer and Djokovic have a style matchup for sure as well, but Djokovic has become obviously quite a good grass court player, obviously beating Federer in 3. I can count. I've watched all 3 finals at Wimbledon, which are super painful for Federer fans. So the differences in theirs. So right now they've played 50 matches, which is more than Federer's played Nadal, which is kind of crazy. And the head-to-head, Djokovic is winning by 4 matches right now, 27-23. One thing Djokovic fans love to say is just how many times he's beaten them in Grand Slams, which is fair enough, which is 11-6 for Djokovic. One thing I like to bring up is Federer had a head-to-head record lead until he was about 33-34. So to me, historically, that's easily when you're leaving your prime. So all the way through Federer's prime, you could say, and historically, you're better when you're on the younger end of your prime than the older end of your prime. Federer's reversing all of this, but that doesn't mean that it's not true still. So what I mean is that when you're 38, I don't think you're as good as you are when you're 18, for example. Like when you're 18, there's so many guys come into their own at that age, not mentally obviously, but with athleticism, you're going to be more athletic when you're that age. But then Federer held that positive head-to-head all the way through Djokovic's dominance until Federer went off with injury in 2016, basically, and then came back and won more slams. So that's something you got to look at. Like, why was he able to keep it up? So there was no point in Federer's kind of career where he couldn't beat Djokovic. There was like some seasons where he got given the business a bit more than others. Like I think 2015 was one of Djokovic's greatest years. He won the Australian Open. Is that the year he won the French Open?
What year?
2015? I think it is.
No.
Or he won at 14?
No, he won at 16, I think.
Oh, yeah, it was 16.
2015, they were like, oh yeah, it's the Djokovic slam, but then Rowinka stopped him in the final.
And then you could say he choked against Wawrinka in the final. And then he won Wimbledon, beat Federer there, and he beat Federer in the Australian Open as well. And he kind of owned him that year. But I feel like they've been on pretty even standing most of their career. I think Federer, mentally, Djokovic has gotten Federer because I honestly don't think Federer likes Djokovic that much. And there's lots of times when I've seen that, even just like watching their matches really closely, looks that Federer will give Djokovic. I think Federer has a ton of respect for Nadal, and I think those guys genuinely actually like each other. Obviously, when they're on the court, it's brutal competition. But I think there's something about Djokovic that irks Federer, and I think that adds a little bit of added mental pressure for him to win on himself. Do you think so at all? Have you gotten that read at all?
I think you can look at who plays exhibition matches together in the off season.
Totally.
And Djokovic and Federer don't play exhibition matches together in the off season.
It's true. Why is that? There's a lot of things. It's like, I don't know. I think earlier Djokovic has definitely grown up a lot, but early in his career, he was quitting matches. He was smashing rackets all the time. Like he did not show the type of kind of like class that Federer and Nadal showed for a long time there, right? And I think now at this point, Djokovic definitely is clean. He's kind of on the same as them. Like he still is a bit more fiery, which I actually like. For those Djokovic fans who are getting absolutely triggered right now listening, I actually like that. I've always said that if I somehow had the skill to be a professional tennis player, I would probably act exactly like Djokovic did. I'm not. Beckett knows I'm not exactly a mouse out on the court. I'm pretty annoying. Like I annoy myself on the court. I get mad. I've broken a couple of rackets. So I'm not saying that it's better to be like Djokovic or Nadal and Federer. Sometimes it's a little bit boring that they're not more fiery. I like that about Djokovic. I'm just saying this is why I don't think Federer has liked Djokovic as much throughout their careers, and why it's added a bit more desire for Federer to win when they play, which might make him lose when he has a couple match points multiple times.
Yeah, totally agree. One interesting stat is Djokovic has won all of their 5-set matches.
That is interesting.
Yeah, not their best of 5, but when it actually goes to the 5th set, Djokovic has won all 5. Yeah,
well, that's a stat that's not really surprising to me at all. Like that's what I've seen when I watch those matches. It's like Djokovic, same with Nadal, and same with Thiem. Like Djokovic can just drag out match, make it physical, and then when Federer's level is going to come down in the 5th set because Djokovic is just out rallying him and making it physical, he has the advantage then. I feel like that he showed that against Thiem, even though Thiem's younger, so he somehow made it more physical, and then team, you can't beat Djokovic when you don't have your weapons, and you just don't have them in the fifth set like you do in the first couple, I think.
I think one of the things with Federer when it comes to fifth sets is like he says Rod Laver is the GOAT, but I think he has a bit of an ego and really he knows that he's one of, if not the best player who ever lived, so he gets a little bit impatient when he hasn't like already won.
Yeah.
So
that's
like,
fair enough.
You see, like he does not have a great fifth set record when it comes to like huge players. Like he has lost 5 sets to like Delpo, Tsonga, those kind of guys.
Totally.
Right?
I think he does get super rattled. I think he gets super rattled when stuff's not working for sure. One example of this I remember watching, he has this weird thing with Delpo as well. I mean, he's completely owned Del Potro in their head-to-head, but Del Potro's beaten him in some pretty big matches. And when I was watching, I think it was the 2017 U.S. Open, I think Del Potro beat him in the quarterfinals. They were playing, and Federer has, like, to me, easily the greatest forehand of all time. But against Del Potro, when they're going forehand to forehand in this match, Del Potro was overpowering him. Like, it was just, like, clear watching this match that when Del Potro's cracking his forehand. And there's no way that Federer wouldn't have recognized that. But instead of changing up his strategy and just drop shotting him like he does on clay, going to Delpo's backhand, making him move, he didn't switch up his strategy. He just kept trying to overpower his forehand because I think in his mind he was going, I have the best forehand ever. You're not going to push me around on my forehand. And then he ended up losing that match because of, I think, that mentality. So I totally know what you mean. I don't deny, all those players have egos for sure, and Federer is definitely potent. He doesn't like losing, and he doesn't like losing to players on his terms. So he's gonna always try and do that, play the game on his terms, and when he does that, it sometimes goes real bad.
Yeah. All right. So between those 3, you're putting Federer and Nadal as most iconic.
Yeah. I'm putting Federer and Nadal as most iconic, followed by Nadal Djokovic, just because I think it's a tighter matchup and it's more. They just had more epic matches and they've played more times. Like, it's insane how many times they've played. And then Federer Djokovic as a close third. Like, those are the 3 greatest players of all time, and their trifecta duel has just been crazy to watch, and we're gonna be regretting it so much when they're gone. I'll tell you that for free. Okay, and the next epic historic rivalry that we are going to talk about is Borg-McEnroe. One of the most obvious ones. A movie's been made about it. But some of these stats I didn't really know because obviously this was way before myself and Beckett's time. But what are some of the stats? Beckett, do you want to get into these stats a little bit here?
So I love this one because it's tied. So it's super close. 7-7, 14 matches altogether. So it seems...
Crazy.
Really close, but if you dig into it a little bit more, McEnroe kind of takes the edge. So,
sorry to cut you off. That's the weird thing. For some reason in my head, I've always thought that Borg was the better version of McEnroe. Like, he was the better one. Like, he had the edge. Like, it's kind of always been made to seem that way. But then when you actually look at it,
I have to be honest. I think one of the reasons is, well, this is obvious, but Borg started losing to McEnroe and then he quit tennis.
Right. That's crazy. That's weird. I wonder if anyone's ever asked him about that. But anyways, go on with the stats.
Yeah, so interestingly, 13 of the 14 matches are semifinals or better. That's epic. One is a round robin in the Masters Grand Prix, which is the same format as like the World Tour Finals is now.
Right.
McEnroe leads finals 5-4, leads Grand Slam play 3-1. All of those are finals.
Yeah.
And that one that Borg won, I believe, is the 1980 one the movie is about.
Yes, I think you are right. I'm just going to look that up here.
Have you watched that movie?
I have not watched that movie. People ask me all the time. Is this the one? Yeah. Borg, yeah, no. It's the 1980. I thought it was the 1970, but that's too old for them.
Yeah, it's too old.
Yeah, so I haven't watched that movie. I've heard it's epic. Johnny Mac says that it's not that accurate to how he was. I don't know why that would be. Shia LaBeouf, like I love him as an actor. But yeah, I think this matchup this rivalry was historic because it was like the original Fire and Ice, not because their styles. Their styles were actually, just because they were older, they look kind of the same. They look more similar, but they are pretty different. Borg was like longer rallier,
Yeah.
more physical. McEnroe liked to keep the point shorter, come to the net, volley a lot more. But they're mostly fire and ice due to their personality differences, right?
Yeah, and I love that. Like, I think that's something tennis right now is missing a little bit because there's been such a precedent now for class, and like that's rewarded so much in tennis because of like the country club attitude where like we have a couple of guys, but all the media's like these guys are so disrespectful to the sport, like Kyrgios or whatever, where they bring like an entertainment focused kind of dynamic to all their matches.
Totally. Well, I think we are missing that in the sport, but we're missing so Djokovic out of the big three guys is the most likely to get pissed, show attitude on the court, yell at the crowd, smash a racket like that, and the further back in history, the more likely that was. And I think he had a little bit of that bad boy rep, so I think that's part of the reason he isn't liked as much around the world as Federer and Nadal. But he's also backed it up by being one of the greatest players of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Johnny Mac did. He was always freaking out, acting like an absolute baby. Like, people called him super brat. Like, the media was all over him back then. But they also had to respect him because he was winning Grand Slam titles left, right, and center. Like, he was like the number one player in the world. He had one of the greatest seasons of all time. So like I think it was 1984.
I think that's correct.
He lost three matches. Like, that's insane. That's a better record than Djokovic has ever had or Federer's ever had.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to respect him, you know what I mean? Even though he was acting like a baby. When Kyrgios acts like a baby, nobody has to respect him because he hasn't done anything in tennis.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That is a good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, the other thing I love about this matchup is like the picture we posted on Instagram. The fashion is epic. Like,
they're just swagged out. We actually have that same picture almost right behind me here in the studio. I don't know if we can see it with the crop, but it's just so vintage. Hey, they got the red and blue. Like, it's just everything looks cool in those photos.
Yeah, like that's the 70s is when like in the 80s is when like tennis was cool. Like, it's not cool the same way it used to be anymore.
Totally.
Like, you had like legendary shoes that like still worn today, like Stan Smiths. I don't think people are going to be wearing like Vapors on the street in 10 years.
The old Stanley Smiths, I know, like, yeah, you see some people doing that, but it's definitely not in the same way. I feel like it's become so big now compared to like then with like money, like they've kind of just like blended into every other top sport. But yeah, I do think tennis has like some street clout for sure. Tennis like definitely does. Because they I think a lot of these like rappers who wear like sneakers will call them tennis shoes sometimes too, right?
Yeah, but they're not wearing like the new ones, right? It's not like
they're wearing old guys.
Shoes
yeah,
where like even like there's like hype basketball shoes or whatever. It's like it has its niche and there's like collectible pieces, but it's not all the same as it used to be.
Totally. Yeah, you're right, and I think Borg and McEnroe did a lot of those. And then even going into our next rivalry, Sampras Agassi, a lot of that style was actually continued by Agassi into the new millennia.
Yeah.
So that's the Borg and McEnroe. It was cut short because Borg retired quick, which is he's kind of like a mysterious guy in tennis history, I feel like. But then we have Sampras Agassi. And Sampras Agassi was led the head-to-head. They played 34 times, which is a lot. Sampras led that 20-14, and in my recollection, again, I never watched either of these guys live, but Sampras was kind of always the better one, the more potent talent, and he won more. So, and that's actually true. Looking at the stats, Grand Slams head-to-head, Sampras leads 6-3. Sampras led finals 9-7. Sampras led every category except for clay, Masters finals, and carpet. There was a tie. They used to play on carpet. I think that would have been like ultra fast, right?
I don't actually know because I was looking at Borg actually had a winning head-to-head on carpet against McEnroe too.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know what that.
It's not really a thing in North America.
It's not. But anyways, yeah. So Sampras was kind of like, he was like the quiet, more reserved guy. He had like a crazy serve, great volleyer, just classic style. That serve, like Federer, won him so many Grand Slams. But then Agassi was like the digger, more passionate on court, and had that crazy flair. Beckett knows a lot. We just dropped Heat on the Feet, talking about the AirTech Challenge 2s that he was wearing back then, right?
Yeah, so I think one of the big contrasts you see here is mental composure. So
Right.
Sampras is just like an insane mental giant. His second serve,
Right.
which I think second serve, most important mentally tough shot that there is. So he had probably the best second serve ever. Like in trouble, second serve ace, let's just like whatever, no problem for him.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never watched that many matches of his, but I have seen that a little bit, and that is epic.
Yeah, but I think their matches were boring because Sampras is boring.
Yeah. And I think the courts were so fast back then that it was like insane. It was like the rallies were very short, and there was like because the technology had elapsed into that new racket, like where it was graphite based, so they were much more powerful. Strings were a lot better, and the courts were still insanely fast. Like I think the courts were insanely fast during Borg McEnroe, but the rackets sucked, so they couldn't hit the ball that hard. So the rallies were still epic back then. But I think if you watch a lot of Sampras Agassi, it's like 3-shot rallies, 4-shot rallies max.
Yeah, so this is before string technology changed, but it's after racket technology changed. So there wasn't that much spin. They're still hitting it pretty flat because they're playing with Sampras played with the gut and Agassi played with Kevlar.
Oh wow.
So that's one of the reasons you don't see the baseline rallies is they still don't have the control on the ball to like really stretch them out.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, Sampras's serve and volley was so good that like I watched a couple of their matches, and it, like Agassi just had to really crack his returns and hit like go for winners or like really push him back. So it's like the points were just short. Like it's either Sampras putting it away in 2 shots or Agassi trying to hit a return winner.
Totally, yeah. And that's probably what made Agassi arguably the greatest returner of all time.
Yeah.
It's probably, from what I've seen most people say, it's between him and Djokovic for the greatest returner of all time. And that makes sense when you're serving against arguably one of the greatest servers of all time. But I feel like the ATP slowed the courts down a lot after that era. And as you know, when Federer started, the courts were a lot faster, and then they just have basically continually slowed down, which has changed the game a lot with the more power. Now there's super long rallies as well. And that's just like an interesting way that the game evolves. But yeah, Sampras and Agassi was such an epic head-to-head and matchup. And Sampras retired super early as well, right? Like he kind of retired when he thought his record was like secure at 14, because the guy below him I think was at like, well, it wasn't even that high. He was like, or far below. It was at like 12, I think, with like Roy Emerson.
Yeah, 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, he retired right after he won, I think, the 2000 U.S. Open or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. No. Yeah. No, he played Federer. Federer beat him in the 2001 Wimbledon.
Okay.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. He retired right after he won his 14th Slam, which is like kind of baller.
That is kind of baller. That's what I'm expecting in 2021. Federer's gonna win the Australian Open, the French Open, the Wimbledon, and then the Olympics, and then retire on the court. That's what I'm calling.
Want to put some money on that?
No, I don't, but because it's a recession right now. But I'm just gonna let you. When that happens, you can say you heard it here first. Also, Sampras retired in 2002. Yeah, after he won the U.S. Open.
Mm-hmm.
Defeating Andre Agassi one more time. That's so gangster. Be like, you know, Andre, I'm just going to retire with a positive head-to-head, so you'll never be able to regain that clout, and I'm going to retire as better than you forever.
Yeah, and those guys don't like each other either.
Really? I thought they did.
Do you remember when Open came out, Agassi's book?
No, I never read it, but I've heard it's epic.
Okay, so Agassi just roasts Sampras, because Sampras tipped like a driver, like a valet driver, like $1 to pick up his car or something. So they're just like making fun of him in the book.
That's funny.
And then they played an exhibition at Indian Wells, like the doubles one, with Nadal and Federer, and they're just roasting each other the whole time. It's like super cringy because Agassi's acting all immature, and Pete is like super mature, doesn't want to like talk to him really at all, but like he's like probably paid quite a bit to be there.
Totally. Yeah, I actually, when I was down in Indian Wells in 2018 watching the tournament without a press pass, still haven't gotten a press pass, but I'm glad we didn't this year because we would have wasted a lot of money flying down there. Pete Sampras was there, and I was talking to this random lady in the crowd because I think Pete Sampras lives closer there or in LA or something, and the lady's son played with Pete Sampras' kid apparently, and Sampras would always come to the courts and just kind of have like a hoodie on and be super low key. He hates attention, it seems like. And then Agassi's got that flair, right? Like he played until 2006, like he was just getting beat like a drum by Federer, and then he retired, and then he still coaches, and he's always hanging around, and he's just a showman. Like he likes to be in the public eye, it seems like. And I also don't buy. I've never read Open, but I do not buy that Agassi hated tennis when he says that.
I don't either.
I just don't believe him.
I think
why would you play for that long? Why would you, like when you see him win these tournaments, like he's like crying and like going up to hug Brad Gilbert, like he loves it so much.
Yeah,
you can tell.
Totally agreed.
Anyways, yeah, that's kind of a wrap up on the Sampras Agassi. We are going to go into some other ones. There were some other weird. Did you get any weird kind of head-to-head stats there, Beckett?
So here's some weird facts.
Okay,
Federer,
let's hear them.
Between the big three, Federer has the most losing head-to-heads. Part of that is because a lot of the guys that he started losing to kind of retired as he was coming in to the game.
Right.
But here's some active players that he has losing head-to-head to.
Right.
Nadal, Djokovic, obvious. Team now he has. Rublev has won 100% of their matches.
Is that one match or is that more?
Yeah, that's 1-for-1.
Okay.
Zverev has a winning head-to-head against him, which I was a little bit surprised about that one. This guy called
That's
Don
kind of a joke.
Skoy.
Yeah, I remember that.
And welcome to the slice friend of the show, Kokkinakis has won.
Friend of the show,
Yeah.
Kokkinakis. I actually just watched that match. They just premiered it on Tennis TV, and I asked Kokkinakis about it in Vancouver, and he was like, "Yeah, it's pretty sick." I watched that match. Federer was not playing his best. I mean, the ones where Donskoy, even Rublev, it's like those are kind of pointless head-to-heads. Like as you could probably, they're like one match, so they don't really count. But it's true. Team and Zverev, it's more legit because they're serious next-gen contenders, obviously. The obvious excuse for that is that Federer's like been super old when playing all of their matches against Team and Zverev, so hopefully they would have had some match wins against him. And have either of them beat Federer in a Grand Slam, though? I don't think so. Team or Zverev. I can't remember a time when
I don't think so.
Federer lost to either of them in a Grand Slam. But yeah, no, Federer's definitely had some losing ones. Nadal and Djokovic also have some random losing ones as well.
Yeah.
Like Nadal has a losing head-to-head, I think like a pretty bad one to Nikolai Davydenko.
Yeah.
No one remembers that. And that's like the weirdest one to me because Nikolai Davydenko has 0 weapons. So I don't know how he won, but he
that's a Djokovic preview almost.
Basically, yeah, just super tough baseliner, like super fast and elastic. Nikolai Davydenko was a gangster, you know. He was just out there, little Russian dude, bald guy. Like you wouldn't even if you didn't know he was a professional tennis player, you'd never guess. And then he's just out there like giving Nadal the business.
Yeah, he said if he had to marry any player, he would marry Federer because he has the most money.
That's so good. That's kind of reminds me of that clip I just posted on Nadal saying that they're like, "Oh, what does Federer mean to you? Like, how special is he?" And then he's like, he's like, "I don't look like I'm gonna be his boyfriend, no."
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, and you got down here as well that no one has a winning record versus Nadal on clay. Not even Gaston Gaudion.
Yeah, and that's the closest one. Closest one.
Right. What is that? Like 2 and 3 or something?
It's even. Oh, they're tied.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you got it.
All right, so Djokovic, we all know, because Kyrgios won't let us forget, that he's got a 2-0 head-to-head over Djokovic, but Taro Daniel has also won their only encounter, and that was a few years ago.
That was a few years ago. That was at the 2018 Indian Wells first round, where Djokovic was trying to come back, apparently too early. And he said that after that match, Djokovic said that he felt like he had never played another match. He felt like that was his first ever professional match, which to me is like the craziest thing I've ever heard, because he'd already won like how many like 12 slams at that point, or 13 slams.
Yeah.
To hear from someone who's beaten everyone, to hear this has felt like my first time. That shows how much of this game is confidence and mental. And I think that's like the biggest reason why the big three have dominated, is because they're so confident and mentally strong because of how much they've won. That they just have so much accumulated, confidence that they're gonna, that their shot's going to land in, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, those are some of the greatest head-to-heads of all time. Of course, there's probably other ones. We didn't get as many suggestions from the fans this time, but I would love to hear what some of your other ones are. What are some that we missed? What are some random ones that are super good that we missed? Also, what are some of the most like crazy head-to-heads like that you'd think would be closer that maybe weren't, or that like I think who was it? Monfils has lost to Djokovic like 17 times in a row, like stuff like that.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Federer has a plus 20 over Wawrinka. It's like 23-3. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that is pretty bad.
And that's a Grand Slam champion too.
That is a Grand Slam champion. So that's another thing for all those guys who choke Federer, or for who chirp Federer for choking. It's like, you know, who did Wawrinka get those 3 Grand Slam victories against? Nadal was injured. I'll give him that. But I think Djokovic choked twice. I don't care how good Wawrinka played. It's not like Wawrinka didn't play that good against Federer. They just found a way to win.
I don't know.
And Djokovic didn't in those 2 Slam finals.
We can argue about that on a later episode.
That is true. So this has been the greatest rivalries of all time. I'm sure we triggered a lot of people the entire way through this. Thank you for listening on the podcast. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a review and a 5-star rating. And then if you're watching this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, and check out the Patreon show, the Front Row Show. If you're on the show, you literally support us. We get way more money from the fans on there than we do from YouTube, and it helps us develop. It helps me give Beckett some money to help grow this, and we're going to be doing really cool things in the future. So thanks for checking that out in the link below. But this has been the podcast with Steven and Beckett. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Do you have any final remarks, Beckett?
Keep the trolls coming on the Instagram. I love seeing you guys tell me that Djokovic is the greatest of all time and then don't actually vote for him.
Yeah, he took a big fat L in the GOAT Championships today with voting. I think he only got 25% of the vote against Federer. We'll see you guys on Instagram. Anyways, this has been a wrap. This has been the podcast with Steven and Beckett. Hey, thanks for watching, folks. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and then you'll never miss another video, interview from tournaments, or vlogs, or any other thing we produce here on The Slice. And you'll become the best tennis fan you can be by watching this video.